everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Hybrid Cloud Partners podcast. I'm Fede Pacheco, one of your co-hosts here. And today we'll be talking about an incredibly profitable opportunity for partners. This is part one of a two-part episode that we have on Azure Arc because it is so fantastic that we need two episodes to cover it. But seriously, every partner that has Windows on SQL Server in their data centers, you should be listening closely because this has really changed the game, right, Adam?
Yeah, it has. It has. So I'm Adam Burke, super excited to be here with Fede on this podcast series. And Fede, why don't you give us just a quick overview of why this is so important?
Yeah, in a very simple way, you can improve your margins leveraging Microsoft's incentives and benefits. You can simplify your operations and save on overhead costs, and you can get the benefits of the Azure cloud without having to migrate your servers to Azure. We understand that not all customers are ready to migrate and modernize yet, so this solution is really great to meeting them where they are. In the last fiscal year, we had hundreds of partners deploy this with thousands of their customers around the globe. One of our largest partners that have led this is Rackspace, who you might recognize as one of the largest multi-cloud solution providers in the world. Well, we'll hear from them very, very soon. How does that sound, Adam?
Yeah, super exciting. We really have a great show for our partners today. I'm part of the data center optimization team. And so I've worked with partners really across the Americas through a number of hybrid cloud deployments over the last year as part of our data center optimization program. And Azure Arc has been, by far one of the most exciting opportunities we've had in years. Many times partners can't even believe, what they're seeing when they can actually have on-premises resources that are connected to Arc. And they're even more excited about the billing and the economics and really the cost savings that go along with it. So it's an incredible opportunity for our partners.
That is awesome, Adam. I definitely want to get us Rackspace in the room soon so that they can tell you from their own experience what it's been from an economic, operational perspective. But first, let's just level set the field here. I want to ask you, before we get Rackspace here, 3 questions, if that's okay, Adam.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect.
So we said Azure Arc 1,000 times. Tell me, what is Azure Arc?
So Azure Arc is really a management platform and a control plane that adds a ton of value to infrastructure deployed outside of Azure. If you just kind of think of the concept of an arc, something that's connecting from one point to another, what we're really looking to do is leverage Azure Arc to connect your data center to the power of Azure to provide additional value. And so we'll touch on kind of some of those biggest or key opportunities here shortly. But essentially, it's a way that you can bring Azure resources and capabilities to a hybrid data center, no migration required.
Okay, so let's jump into those couple of opportunities that you see are more salient right now for partners.
Yeah, so Arc has been around for a number of years, and there's a ton of value that you get. But one of the key tipping points that we have had this year with it is really around cost savings with SQL. So Arc has something called Arc-enabled SQL, that allows you to take an existing SQL server that if you're a SPLA partner, you're licensing with SPLA, and basically substantially reduce your costs while providing additional value to your customers through Arc. And so that's been a huge driver from a cost saving standpoint. Another key opportunity is really around security. So, over the last 12 months and then looking ahead here, we have basically Windows Server 2012, SQL 2012, and SQL 2014 that are all really reaching or have reached end of life. And so with that in mind, Arc is really a great way to provide extended security updates and help keep your customers secure while creating an additional revenue stream for your customers as well. And so think of extended security updates as something additional you can offer your customers and sell them to maintain security while they plan to really modernize that infrastructure. And Arc-enabled SQL is a great way to reduce your costs around SQL Server, especially if you're purchasing on SPLA today.
That is so exciting. And we're going to dive into these concepts, both of these opportunities, extended security updates and Arc-enabled SQL in our second episode and bring in some other stories and technical folks to help us. But for now, Adam, before we bring in Rackspace, can you tell us what the profitability story is for partners and their customers when they incorporate Arc into their practice?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you essentially get the CSP economics of SQL in an on-demand fashion through Azure versus paying your SPLA costs. And so when we look at SPLA ERP versus Azure listed pricing, it's actually identical. The difference is if you're a CSP partner, you have a number of ways to reduce your costs. You can lower your costs by taking advantage of partner earned credit. So for our direct partners, that's 15%. And then as of today, you have both the Modern Commerce incentive and the new customer ad incentive for Azure, which provide really an additional kind of 19% savings when combined to your customers. And whether you're a direct CSP or an indirect CSP, you have the ability to leverage those back-end incentives directly from Microsoft. In addition, we have the DCO program. And so your savings with the DCO program may vary. We welcome a conversation on that. Feel free to reach out to us on the website if you want to go deeper there. But you basically have 4 levers here to reduce your costs around SQL with Arc. And then in addition, Arc provides cloud economics inside a partner data center. So you're only billed hourly for what you consume. And so that can drive additional cost savings around provisioning and deprovisioning infrastructure that we don't even have represented here. But at the end of the day, it's a massive cost savings for our partners when they shift these SPLA workloads over to Arc-enabled SQL.
Fantastic. And as a question, we definitely got to ask Rackspace about their total cost of ownership and how it's shifted from what it used to be on SPLA to now Arc enabling their operations.
Yeah. They have a great story to tell. I'm excited to hear what they're going to say. Before we jump in, if you're wondering how these opportunities fit in your organization, remember that our DCO team is here and available anytime to discuss these topics at no cost to you. You can connect with our team at dco.microsoft.com.
And now we have a fantastic partner in the room. Rackspace manages more than 95,000 customers in 120 countries across 29 data centers and public cloud practices. They're a very close partner with us. They've been a big driver of Arc, the leader in the space, and they're also working with us all around the globe. From Rackspace joining us, we have Jeff DeVerter and Zachary Zim. How are you doing today?
Oh man, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, doing wonderful. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Would you like to introduce yourselves and tell us what you do at Rackspace?
So my name is Jeff DeVerter. I've been at Rackspace since 2008, and Adam Burke and I have a whole lot of history of helping our customers over here at Rackspace be successful with their technology, All's technology, Microsoft technology, and driving their businesses forward. My current title, as there have been many over the years, is Chief Technology Evangelist, and I started at Rackspace helping with good old SharePoint, launching our SharePoint offering and Exchange and Skype for Business. Remember that one? And then launched Azure or Microsoft Private Cloud and the Azure offering and all sorts of stuff. So a lot of history there. Love the partnership and delighted to be on today. Zach.
Yeah, Zachary Sim. I'm a just over 6-year racker. I started off managing all of our Microsoft licensing. So you think about the good old days of SPLA, high volume, EA, SCEs, all the fun. And then for the last couple of years, I have been leading our Azure product service line. So all the services that we wrap around the Microsoft technologies and the way we take that to market is where I focus all my attention.
Racker, I like that term. Hadn't heard that before. Well, let's just start there. Let's talk about Rackspace as a whole. Tell us more about the company for those who haven't heard about you yet.
Sure. So the company started way back in 1998. Can you believe it? A quarter century now we're talking about technology here. And very much started in the managed hosting business and help to define what that is as a category. And for those that, as we think about what does that actually mean? Well, it means that we had servers, we had data centers, and we had smart people, and they were all for rent. And the real mission back in the early days was helping customers, again, just be more effective with the technology that makes their businesses run. Over the years, that's changed a lot. You heard in my intro, my time helping with SharePoint and with Azure and the different stuff that's moved along. The first decade was really focused very much in and around that managed hosting space. Then as cloud became a thing, we got into it. In fact, we developed our own in the early days and managed that for a good long time. And then realized it was better to be friends with Microsoft and help push Azure along than it was to try to compete there. And now, of course, that has transformed into how we're helping customers with AI and their data estates and transforming their whole technology estates. But at the end of the day, Rackspace is focused on helping customers be more successful with the tech they have. Now, if only it was all new and shiny, but it isn't, which is why I'm so excited about our partnership specifically here in and around Azure Arc and how that's helping us to streamline that experience, to help customers, in the security space, but then also how they're managing those aged workloads, which, were just coming out when we first started here.
That's awesome. It's such a tremendous opportunity, and it really is exciting to kind of see the history and how much we've been able to do through Arc, and then how much Arc enables us to do on a go forward state as well, I would say. When you think about kind of the Arc opportunity holistically, how do you think about it? Like, what does that mean to you all from a Rackspace standpoint and from a product enablement standpoint?
Well, I'll start and then I'll let Zach jump in. I am excited about it personally because it is the bridge to hybrid computing. And that is really where Rackspace is focused on these days. Because, while we are helping with all the fancy new stuff in AI and cloud native, the reality is that so many workloads really just demand a single tenant infrastructure or a private infrastructure. Still can be very modern private cloud. And Adam, you and I have had a lot, we've known, how long have we known each other? I mean, at least over a decade. I'll just say over a decade.
Yeah, let's just keep it there.
Yeah,
good solid.
There was less of the gray when we started all of that. You would come knocking on our door every now and again, and there would be this program or that program, but all of them tended to be focused on how do we get these workloads specifically into Azure, and sometimes it just didn't make sense. This is the perfect world for that. It allows us through a single pane of glass to be able to manage this stuff, to be able to secure it. Zach, you can get into the product deeper, but it really is that enabler of hybrid computing.
Yeah, Jeff, I think you stated really well there. In my unique position coming from the operational side and moving into the product side, having managed all that licensing for customers, Arc offers Rackspace, which already sits in a unique proposition value for customers. We still have 29 plus data centers. We have a massive estate in Azure. And so we have this actually true hybrid multi-cloud experience. And so enabling customers to utilize the services uniquely across in order to consolidate tooling, in order to get better tooling, it's a game changer for us. You look at just the licensing aspect, that's one silo. They used to have to go to maybe 3 different partners to satisfy all their licensing requirements. Now they can go through one partner, like Rackspace. If you look at it from a extended support, same kind of scenario where they're having to talk to Microsoft, they're having to work with an ISV or a VAR, and then work with Rackspace. And then if you look at the emerging technologies, a lot of security tools in the on-premise world are not using the same technology and are not as forward-looking as a technology like Azure Sentinel. So now you start bringing in and layering on all these different aspects, and you can really see just the growth and the opportunity that it provides the customer long-term. And as Jeff said, the single pane of glass is huge, because anytime you can look at it through one view, you're removing a lot of the noise, a lot of the headaches, and you're not having to, make 4 different API calls to get all the data consolidated. So
it touched upon a bunch of things we want to ask you more about. So let's start with one, Zach, here. And it's where we started earlier in 2024. We started with the extended security updates. I think it was actually in late 2023. I stand corrected by myself.
Yeah.
So tell us about that opportunity and what drove you to start there.
Yeah, so this was born out of the need for customers wanting to kind of one throat to choke, as everyone likes to say. They're coming to us for all the licensing. They can't get off these applications. These applications that they've been born and bred in are built upon these legacy, licensing like WinServer 2012. And so they said, look, I don't want to go to 3 different people to be able to get extended support, license it, and manage it. How can you all help us? And so the ability to enable extended support through Arc is massive, because they don't necessarily have a cloud strategy yet. But what this does is it helps enable them to start thinking, well, hey, if I am able to buy some time through extended support, I now have time to enable and build out that cloud strategy of what it looks like to get to Azure native.
That's awesome. I think touching on that too, I know SQL is a really exciting area we've been doing a lot of work on. Maybe you could share a little bit more about that. And actually, you mentioned it earlier, Zach, in kind of your intro, your SPLA license management days. In addition to all the other benefits, how does this simplify someone's life on SPLA versus Arc, right? I think there's some goodness there if you're in the SPLA
Everyone's
world.
life is better without SPLA, but moving on.
Yeah, I probably have some PTSD from all the days of managing our SPLA environment. But I mean, purely stated, it's the ability to automate, the ability to have a singular view, to see it in real time. And then for the customer, right, it's true utilization. So they have the ability to realize the goodness of what cloud really means and the scalability. And then from an onboarding perspective or a deployment perspective, it makes it really easy to say, oh, Arc's there. We don't have to go re-image. We don't have to go change this or, rip out the license key or, obfuscate it so the customer doesn't do that. All the nuances. And then, if I put on my cap of I'm running a business from an audit perspective, no longer is I'm worried about I don't have visibility because you have pure visibility throughout. So
that's awesome. Maybe you could touch on a little bit of the economics there also from a SPLA standpoint and kind of transitioning to Arc. I think especially around Arc-enabled SQL because and would love to hear more, but I think on the ESU side, that really translated as incremental revenue for you, where SQL was really more of a cost savings and kind of total cost of ownership reduction opportunity, right? Where you're reducing really what that TCO was, if I've got that correct.
Yeah, correct. So when we started looking at ESU, it was more of a kind of an upsell. So, hey, you can buy it from us. We have a small margin on top of it because we're managing everything. When we started looking at moving away from SPLA SQL and into Arc-enabled SQL, yeah, you're right. The cost savings, the revenue driven from that to reduce that total cost of ownership is massive. So putting it in rough numbers, around $40 million over the next 3 years is something that Rackspace will realize in these benefits from a TCO. And so when you start thinking about that as a program, and then you start taking this out 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, it's massive just because of the size of our customer base, right? So we're a hyperscaler SPLA, which means we're one of the top 3 or 4 out in the world. And we have a lot of customers that consume SPLA licensing. And so as Microsoft continues to develop and integrate Arc, it's just an even bigger proposition value for Rackspace.
Well, and when you also think about it, it helps get a customer away from those dreaded 2 words, true up. Now they're actually able to manage, and we keep saying the single pane of glass that went through the choke, whatever the phrase is. But ultimately, they get to manage their business in a day-to-day basis, and there are no surprises. I mean, the end of the year or whenever the re-up would come around, and the IT leaders would have to go sniffing around and figure out where all these licenses were and get shocked because they proliferate and they have no idea. The manageability gets really challenging. So this is one of the areas, we see the financial gain to Rackspace, but really it's that customer service and being able to serve them in a way that allows them to run their business in a more economical, real-time way.
I love that we've centered this later part of the discussion so far on the customer impact. So before we jump on to how you interacted with the DCO team and all that, I want to ask you if you have any anecdotal experience from testimonies to just the way it was landing with customers and how they felt and what they experienced.
Yeah, purely from an NPS score, right? Having customers be able to have that kind of single throat to choke, as we say, coming to us for not just our SPLA licensing, but for also that extended support, that's a huge value for them. For the clarity and the granularity of being able to tag, being able to access and see real time what their utilization is, again, that it just leads to the better customer experience. It leads to better visibility or observability, as we like to say, which at the end of the day, all customers want that, right? If you can see where your money is, you're going to be a lot more secure and a lot happier. So, yeah, we've seen a lot of customer positive NPS scores or net promoter scores from this project overall. It's been really beneficial in that manner.
That's awesome. So, the hosting space, the hybrid cloud space, the managed service provider space, like however you like to define it, is, really, I'd say a fairly close-knit ecosystem, right? We all kind of know a lot of the players in the market there. And, given that's the space that Fede and I, work in and are looking to try and help and serve, what anecdotes would you have for others that may be looking to kind of work with the data center optimization team around really deploying Arc? Any lessons learned or details that you could kind of share with the ecosystem there?
I think I would double back to my comment earlier, and that is, there's been a strong desire by Microsoft to pull all the workloads out into Azure. And the reality that this is a hybrid world for the foreseeable future. And foreseeable future means as far as we can see. We are not pulling everything into a public cloud only environment. I mean, there's just too many workloads that have all the restrictions we know. Could be old servers, could be geographic challenges, could be any of these numbers. But the fact that this program specifically enables that and does it in a way that empowers the customer to get the services that they need. But then from an MSP point of view, it's just easier to manage. There's more opportunity to sell more stuff. There's margin to be had, and you can be more efficient. So there's savings to be had.
And building upon that, I go again back to this transformation or mind shift around Microsoft saying everything has to be in Azure, into moving into this kind of hybrid world. I think it's really beneficial for the customers because those that need their applications to live, whether it's networking rules or pure compliance rules, they want to live in the private cloud world or on-premise world. But now again, it opens up AI, it opens up security like Sentinel, it opens up licensing, it opens up, as the Microsoft obviously evolves constantly, all these future services that they can now consume. It's a massive transformation journey for the customer in of itself to be able to utilize all those benefits.
That's awesome. And I want to touch upon also the impact that it had for you to do this in partnership with the data center optimization team. Can you speak to what that meant for you?
Yeah, I mean, the DCO team, obviously, Adam, you and Fede were obviously very heavily involved from the very front of the process, but y'all's ability to jump on a call with the engineers to talk through different scenarios that we were seeing, because again, we don't have just a simple singular customer base. It's very diverse. It has a lot of different platforming, whether it's Hyper-V or even on the VMware stack. And so the ability to utilize y'all's intelligence and y'all's teams and y'all's assets was massive in being able to successfully get it off the ground, successfully launch through all the different milestones. And then obviously the DCO agreement in of itself was, I think, a huge step forward in the relationship between Microsoft and Rackspace, but also it shows the success of Arc in that that's what the basis of it is.
So in terms of opportunities, what are your thoughts on kind of with this platform? How do you see the next 6 to 18 months playing out? Like anything you can share in terms of forward looking with Arc?
Yeah. So from an Arc standpoint, we've mentioned Azure Sentinel a couple of times. We're looking at utilizing Sentinel to replace some legacy security tooling. We're also looking at obviously SQL Server 2014 into supports coming down the pipeline very soon. And then, long term, we would love to continue to work with Microsoft hand in hand on how we can continue to build out Arc from an engineering standpoint, because as we look at our tool utilization and our tool sprawl, we begin to see a lot of parallels to what Arc has the ability to do as a management tool in of itself, like the core root of what Arc is versus all these different tools we use. And so now we can start rationalizing our software stack in of ourselves. So anytime you can do that, it's obviously great because cost benefits and then customer benefits. Now they have one tool that does multiple things. So there's less security risk, less networking you're having to work through. And obviously change management loves when you only have one or two tools. So
yeah, when you can limit those tools, you touched on it there at the end, Zach, and that's limiting the complexity. Complexity just breeds opportunity for security issues, opportunity for misconfiguration, which then damages customer relationship potentially. So, when there's a best of breed out there that we can consolidate in and around, we're going to do it.
And one thing I do want to point out, because this is something we've heard from our partners, is all of these next step capabilities are either included, like you can do a best practice assessment and it's no additional charge, or it's something that they get to opt in, right? It's not something that's going to start billing you for it, right? All these Defender, Sentinel capabilities, you won't have to pay for them unless you're actually in agreement with your customer to make it part of your services, right?
Well, isn't that just like an expansion of the Azure experience? You get into a base level capability that provides value, that you have proven value of cost savings and potential revenue as well. And then on a business case analysis, you can then step forward with your customers to do things that make the most sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's super well said, Jeff. I mean, I think the thing that's super exciting about Arc is how we really bring like cloud economics into all partner data centers, right? That true kind of pay as you go, not pay by the month, but really, pay by the down to the second technically, right? With Arc, just from a use case standpoint is awesome. So, super exciting to see that.
We have one more question for you guys before we let you go. And it's, again, looking at your peers in the MSP and hybrid cloud business, what advice would you give them as they're hearing about this based on your experience?
I think I'm going to use the same answer I've been giving in another version. And that is, Adam and I have known each other for a long time. We've covered that. We sort of kept him at arm's length at points because he was coming for our workloads. And those workloads in a data center were there for a reason. And one part of that reason was a financial reason. This is a partnership and it's working really well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. From a pure partnership standpoint, this allows us to take what was more of a defensive posture with the Microsoft account teams into more of a, hey, how can we actually grow these accounts? How can we work together and take what's already existing and kind of launch it into the stratosphere? Because the ability to use all the new services from Azure, and Adam, I think you put it really well, that the ability to transport the scalability, the portability, all of those things into the on-premise world or multi-cloud world. On-premise is not the only area you can use Arc. It's a massive opportunity for all MSPs that they could take advantage of.
Jeff, Zach, thank you so much for making this real. We dove deep into Arc today, but there's nothing like hearing it from a partner, especially one that is thriving and that complements not only the why they should do it from a technical perspective, but also the business sense. So thank you for leading that. We look forward to continuing and building on this partnership for the upcoming years. And for our audience, keep in touch with us through the DCO portal. And also in the next episode, we're going to keep talking about hybrid cloud solutions, now jumping into Azure Stack HCI. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Stay tuned for more insights and stories from Microsoft's data center optimization team. Be sure to stay connected at dco.microsoft.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.